ruined everything: my affair, his prison sentence, and the unforgivable mistake that shattered my family. He's gone. I'm alone. And my kids, they despise me. A bitter truth I whisper to myself each night as the silence of my empty house presses in on me. My children aren't here. My ex-husband loathes me with a burning passion. My immediate family is fractured beyond repair. And the worst part? I can't escape the crushing weight of self-loathing for what I've done. It all started in 2015. I was 39, a milestone that seemed to trigger something dark within me. I took my ex-husband for granted, I admit it. He showered me with compliments every single day, telling me I was beautiful, expressing his desire for me, reassuring me of his unwavering care, and treating me as his equal. He didn't put me on some unrealistic pedestal as a queen or a princess. Instead, he valued me as his partner. We were high school sweethearts, married for 20 years at that point, practically each other's only, and everything seemed right. My entire family adored him. My brother looked up to him, and my ex always supported him through thick and thin. He was the person everyone turned to in times of trouble, always ready to lend a helping hand. He was, without a doubt, a genuinely good man. Over the years, we had 2 amazing sons, who were 18 and 16 at the time of the story, and beautiful twin girls, just 13. I had gained weight and become incredibly self-conscious, yet he still called me love. His voice filled with genuine affection. Our fights were rare, like fleeting storms in a clear sky. When we did argue, it was usually about sex, or rather, the lack of it on my part, and the things I flat out refused to do in bed. It wasn't that I didn't want to do things, it was that I simply wasn't in the mood. A feeling he seemed to understand, at least on the surface. My 39th birthday was a watershed moment, a grand unveiling of the new me. I had dedicated the entire year to the gym, immersing myself in yoga and Pilates. My hard work paid off, resulting in a $180 weight loss, bringing me down to a svelte 135. It was a radical transformation, a completely new sensation for someone who had always considered herself plump. My ex-husband joined me at the gym, although not as religiously, shedding $260 down to $225, sculpting his own physique. He couldn't keep his hands off me, constantly pulling me close, whispering sweet nothings in my ear. But I remained frustratingly indifferent, still not in the mood. He tried. God, did he try? We went out for romantic dinners, danced the night away, took leisurely walks hand in hand. He always helped around the house, a true partner in every sense of the word. Even after 20 years, he gazed at me with a passion that could melt glaciers. Any woman would crave that kind of adoration, I know. But I remained unmoved, stuck in this perplexing state of apathy. At the time, I chalked it up to early menopause, because we only had sex maybe 2 or 3 times a month, and I was a one-and-done kind of girl. He craved more, always. He suggested couples counseling, hoping to reignite the spark, but I stubbornly refused. And that, my friends, is where my selfishness truly comes into play. A new manager started working in my office shortly after my birthday. He was significantly younger, undeniably attractive, and for reasons I still can't fully comprehend. He was interested in me. Initially, I ignored him, brushing off his attempts at conversation. Then, it morphed from ignoring to casual chats, harmless banter over coffee. He flirted outrageously, so I made a point of showing him my wedding ring, a clear signal to back off. But after 2 relentless months of his charm offensive, my resolve crumbled and I reciprocated, fanning the flames of temptation. That's when I started unloading my life story onto him, confiding my deepest insecurities and vulnerabilities. I found myself thinking about him more and more, daydreaming about stolen moments, and getting lost in the fantasy. It was an emotional affair. I recognize that now, a dangerous game played with fire. But I was too caught up in the thrill, too blinded by the novelty of it all. My ex-husband suspected something was terribly wrong with me. We had a furious argument, one that I feel I instigated, picking a fight over nothing. He reached out to kiss me, a gesture that once brought me comfort, but I subconsciously recoiled, a horrified expression flitting across my face. It wasn't directed at him per se. It was because I was thinking about another man as my husband leaned in, and I was utterly disgusted with the whole situation. At least, that's what I tell myself to this day. A week later, fueled by this growing inner turmoil, I asked the new boss to meet me at a cafe, hoping to put an end to this dangerous game before it spiraled out of control. I was about to beg him to leave me alone, to tell him I couldn't do this, that it was destroying my marriage and my family. But he kissed me first, silencing my protests, erasing my better judgment, and my thoughts went blank. That marked the beginning of our 6-month affair, a whirlwind of clandestine meetings, whispered promises, and stolen moments of passion. During that period, I did things with this man that my ex-husband had long desired. I was more willing, more adventurous, more often in the mood. I think it was because it was new, exciting, forbidden. During this time, my ex and I continued to have sex, albeit far less frequently. I started pushing him away emotionally, nitpicking his minor habits, even criticizing him relentlessly, tearing down the man I once claimed to love. I'm utterly ashamed of how I treated him during that time, how I disregarded his feelings, how I carelessly shattered his heart. I only understood the magnitude of my actions when my brother came to visit and informed me that my ex had confided in him, pouring out his heart in a torrent of despair. My ex was despondent, contemplating divorce, claiming that he no longer loved me and that he was beginning to lose interest in me. The spark between us extinguished long ago. That confession shook me to my core, jolting me out of my self-absorbed haze. So I immediately called it off with the new boss, quit my job, severing all ties with that chapter of my life, and promised myself that I would dedicate every fiber of my being to making my husband feel loved and cherished once more. I was determined to change, to become a better wife, to salvage what remained of our shattered marriage. Then, my AP, my affair partner, showed up at my house unannounced, carrying a box of office supplies for my desk, which I had foolishly ordered to be shipped to my home. We spoke, a strained, awkward conversation filled with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. He wanted to know what he had done wrong, what had changed, and I told him I needed to work on my marriage, that this was a mistake, a dangerous detour I could no longer afford. I told him to leave, to disappear from my life forever. But he wanted one last chance, one final moment of connection. I told him no, firmly, but he begged and pleaded, his voice laced with desperation. And like a complete and utter fool, I caved. We went into the guest room, and what started as a conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument, a messy, destructive dance of lust and regret. I'm not sure how long we were at it, fighting one minute and kissing the next, tangled in a web of my own making. But when he was on top of me, pinning me down, I felt him violently snap back, recoiling as if struck by lightning. Then, there was a huge crash, a deafening sound that reverberated through the house. I sat up, disoriented, and my ex stood in the doorway, his face a mask of raw, unadulterated fury. My AP was on the floor, groaning in pain, and there was a gaping hole in the wall, a testament to the violent explosion of rage that had just ripped through our lives. I tried to talk to my ex, to explain, to apologize, but his eyes were bloodshot, filled with a simmering rage that terrified me. His lips trembled uncontrollably as tears streamed down his cheeks, a waterfall of pain and betrayal. I could tell he was in immense agony, his heart shattered into a million pieces, and I felt a wave of self-disgust wash over me, drowning me in shame. I watched, paralyzed, as my AP struggled to stand, attempting to escape the carnage. My ex looked at him, his eyes burning with hatred, and my AP, emboldened by adrenaline and fear, told him that if he knew what was best for him, he'd back off, that he couldn't win this fight. And that's when my ex snapped, unleashing a torrent of pent-up rage and frustration, transforming into a man I barely recognized. He assaulted him, a brutal, uncontrolled attack fueled by years of suppressed emotions and the ultimate betrayal. I yelled and cried for my ex to stop, screaming at him to regain control. Desperate, I jumped on his back, attempting to pull him off. But he merely shrugged me off like a pesky fly, slamming me to the ground with brutal force. Everything became blurry for a time, the sounds muffled, distorted, as if I were underwater. But when I regained consciousness, my ex had my AP pinned to the ground, his face a bloody mess, and was calmly on the phone with 911. All I could do was stare at my AP's injured face, the blood and tea scattered on the floor beside him, a grotesque tableau of destruction. There was a loud bang on the door, an earth-shattering sound that signaled the arrival of law enforcement. I saw my ex carefully place the phone on speaker, setting it gently on the floor, then dropping to his knees, placing his hands on the back of his head in a gesture of surrender. The door burst open and the police stormed in, handcuffing my ex without a word. Paramedics arrived shortly thereafter, rushing to attend to my AP's severe injuries. At the hospital, everything went from bad to catastrophic. My father didn't say a word to me, his eyes filled with a profound sense of shame and disappointment. My brother was yelling at me, his face contorted with anger and disbelief, questioning how I could have done this to my ex, how I could have betrayed the man who had always been there for us. My mother, ever the optimist, tried to comfort me, telling me everything would be fine, a sentiment that only fueled my father's rage. His family was even more incensed. His sister threatened me, promising a reckoning, and his parents looked at me with such venomous hatred that I genuinely feared for my safety, as if they wished to hasten my demise. I approached my children, desperate for a connection, but they refused to speak to me. Their faces closed off, their hearts hardened against me. My sons wouldn't even look at me, their eyes filled with a cold indifference that cut deeper than any insult. My AP was severely injured, his face mangled beyond recognition, requiring extensive reconstructive surgery. My ex had nearly crushed him. At the hospital, a woman stormed into my room, her eyes blazing with fury, and immediately attacked me, her nails raking across my face. My brother managed to pull her away, preventing further damage, and I soon discovered that she was my AP's wife. I hadn't even realized he was married, a fact that only compounded my guilt and shame. He never wore a ring, never mentioned a wife, never hinted at the existence of another woman in his life. It made me feel even worse, if that was even possible. Prior to the trial, my sons stayed with their grandparents on my husband's side, seeking refuge from the storm I had created. My girls refused to speak with me, their silence a deafening condemnation. My ex did not want to see me either, his heart shattered beyond repair. I attempted to visit him at the county jail, desperate for a chance to apologize, but I was forbidden from seeing him, turned away at the gate. My brother, in a twisted act of loyalty, made sure my ex was transferred to the correctional facility where he worked, so he could monitor him, ensuring his safety. When I requested my brother to deliver a message for me, a desperate plea for forgiveness, he told me to go to hell, severing our connection with a single, brutal sentence. During the trial, I saw my ex for the first time in months. His presence a painful reminder of everything I had lost. He gazed at me with pure, unadulterated rage, a searing look that burned through my soul, and it hurt more than I could have ever imagined. He had always looked at me with love, even during our arguments, even when we were at odds. But throughout the trial, his eyes were filled with hatred, a reflection of the devastation I had wrought. I had to excuse myself multiple times, seeking refuge in the restroom to compose myself, to wipe away the tears that constantly threatened to spill over. As the days passed, I was compelled to recount my affair in excruciating detail, forced to relive the betrayal and the heartbreak for everyone to hear. When I informed them how long it had lasted, my ex visibly flinched, his face etched with a new wave of devastation, and my father stood up and exited the courtroom, unable to bear witness to my shame. During my ex's testimony, I discovered that he had returned home that fateful day to surprise me with lunch, and a weekend trip for two to the Catskills, a romantic retreat he had meticulously planned. But as he walked in, he stumbled upon the scene, the horrifying reality of my betrayal playing out before his very eyes. He claimed that when the AP told him to step aside, he snapped, losing control, pummeling him with his fists, stopping only after he flung me off his back. Realizing the extent of his rage, he instantly called 911, his voice trembling with fear and remorse. And we heard the recording in court, a chilling reminder of the chaos and violence I had unleashed. Hearing the misery in his voice, the heartbreaking sobs as he desperately followed the operator's instructions, was utterly devastating. The AP, unable to speak verbally, was heavily drugged, his face a mask of bandages and stitches, which made me sick because I knew I was to blame for everything. My ex broke his eye socket, cheekbones, and jaw, leaving him permanently scarred. They claimed there were bone fragments that were too small to piece back together, a grotesque detail that haunted my dreams. My ex was charged with a third-degree felony and sentenced to 7 years in prison, a devastating blow that sent shockwaves through the courtroom, causing my kids to yell and protest, their cries echoing through the sterile space. My girls and his family let out a howl of anguish that still haunts me to this day, a constant reminder of the pain I had inflicted. The first 3 months were unbearable, a living nightmare from which I couldn't escape. My AP soon-to-be ex-wife sued me for alienation of affection, a legal consequence of my infidelity. My ex filed for divorce, putting an end to our 20-year marriage, a bond that had been irrevocably broken. My eldest son moved out, unable to bear the toxic atmosphere of our home. My other son remained locked in his room, a silent, brooding presence, and my twins were rebelling fiercely, lashing out in every way imaginable. My ex-sister-in-law attacked me in the middle of Price Chopper, a public shaming that left me humiliated and terrified. When I tried to apologize to his mother, the woman who had always treated me like a daughter, she spat in my face, a visceral rejection that shattered my heart. My father and brother refused to speak with me, their silence a deafening condemnation. Eventually, I was forced to find a new job, as there was no money coming in, and I had nearly depleted my savings. But I was essentially blacklisted in my sector, my reputation tarnished beyond repair by the negative publicity surrounding the scandal. So I started working in retail, stocking shelves and ringing up groceries, and became a seasonal H&R Block adjuster during tax season, struggling to make ends meet. I almost lost my house, the roof over my children's heads. My ex refused to let me visit him in prison, his heart hardened against me, and each letter I sent, filled with desperate apologies and heartfelt pleas, was returned unopened, a tangible rejection of my remorse. Crying in the shower became practically a daily habit, a release for the pent-up guilt and shame that consumed me. My parents almost split up because my mother was continually defending me, trying to see the good in me despite everything I had done. My brother refused to accept me, even though we had known each other since elementary school, our bond seemingly unbreakable. Soon, I began to have thoughts of ending it all, of packing my things and simply disappearing, escaping the crushing weight of my guilt. The burden was too heavy to bear. I eventually sought professional help, seeing a therapist who admonished me for becoming too familiar with my ex, for no longer considering him a spouse, but instead viewing him as a friend with perks. I did, she was right. I became too comfortable with him, too complacent, too careless. I regarded him as a comrade, a constant presence in my life, but he saw me as his wife, the mother of his children, the woman he adored and wanted to spend the rest of his life with. I took him for granted, carelessly dismissing his feelings, ignoring his needs, and ultimately betraying his trust in the most devastating way imaginable. Almost a year passed and my children remained cold, distant, and unforgiving. When I served dinner, they would take their meal and disappear to their rooms, not even looking at me, their faces devoid of any warmth or affection. I had a few meltdowns, desperately imploring them to say anything to me, to acknowledge my existence, but nothing. They remained silent, their silence a constant reminder of my failure as a mother. My brother got married and I was not invited, a stinging rejection that further isolated me from my family. But my children were there, attending the ceremony without me, celebrating a milestone I was excluded from. I continued to try to visit my ex in prison, clinging to the hope that he had finally put me on the visitor list. But I was always turned down, my name conspicuously absent. My letters were still getting returned and opened, a clear indication that he wanted nothing to do with me. It left me terribly depressed, spiraling into a dark abyss of despair, and I felt I deserved it, that I was getting exactly what I deserved. Then, unexpectedly, my brother showed up at my door. I was both surprised and pleased to see him, as it was the first time he had visited my house since the trial. But his visit wasn't a gesture of reconciliation, a sign of forgiveness. He just came to reprimand me, informing me that my ex was in the hospital after being stabbed. Apparently, another inmate had attempted to sexually assault him in his cell, resulting in my ex being stabbed in the stomach and the inmate's spine being broken. My brother yelled at me, his voice filled with venom, "You did this," before turning on his heel and returning to his truck, leaving me standing there, stunned and heartbroken. I grieved for days thereafter because he was right. I did do this. My actions, my selfishness, my betrayal had led to this. To my ex-husband fighting for his life in a prison hospital. I attempted to visit my ex in the infirmary, desperate to see him, to apologize, to offer my support, but I was forbidden, my presence deemed unwelcome. For more years, I attempted to communicate with him, continuing to write letters, pouring out my heart in every word, begging for forgiveness. But they were always returned, a constant reminder of my failure. Fortunately, our children visited their father frequently, providing me with glimpses into his life, snippets of information about his well-being. I learned that he had been placed in protective custody by my brother after the attack, a measure taken to ensure his safety. My eldest son graduated from the same college as my ex and majored in the same field, following in his father's footsteps. He only called his siblings, carefully excluding me from his life. He never wanted to talk to me, his voice cold and distant whenever I tried to reach out. He never came to our place for the holidays, preferring to spend them with his grandparents, solidifying his rejection of me. My other son followed suit, attending the same institution and refusing to call me, perpetuating the cycle of estrangement. My twins were difficult to deal with, acting out in anger and resentment. But they went to see their father once a week, which seemed to help them cope, providing them with a sense of stability and connection. When they became too disobedient, their uncle would punish them, stepping in as a surrogate father figure. My brother and I continued to communicate sparingly, our conversations strained and awkward. I tried to visit his wife after they had their first child, hoping to mend fences and rebuild our fractured relationship, but I was ordered to leave, my presence deemed unwelcome. My mother kept me updated on their life, sharing photos and stories of my niece. But my father still refused to acknowledge me, his heart hardened against me. Then, at the start of May this year, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon. My children were joyful, their faces radiant with happiness, and my sons returned home, moving back into the house they had abandoned years ago. I had no idea why, but at that moment it didn't matter. They were home and that's all that mattered. For months my children were present, their laughter echoing through the house, their presence filling the empty spaces in my heart. I tried everything I could to express my regret, to show them how sorry I was for the pain I had caused, but I was mostly ignored. My attempts at connection met with indifference. Still, They were talking to me, engaging in brief conversations, sharing snippets of their lives, and it made me incredibly glad to have any kind of interaction with them. My eldest had been dating a woman for over a year, a fact he shared with his siblings, but not with me. My second-born was on my college track team, excelling in his athletic pursuits, and my girls started talking to me again, confiding in me, sharing their hopes and dreams, their fears and insecurities. I hated myself even more for what I had done to them, for robbing them of their father, for shattering their sense of security and stability. It was wonderful to see them smiling, joking, and eating supper together again like a family. At the end of August, I was preparing for the twins' first day of senior year, a momentous occasion that also coincided with their 18th birthday. I conveyed my enthusiasm for their birthday party, excitedly sharing what I had planned, hoping to make it a celebration they would never forget. My girls immediately asked if we could reschedule, their faces clouded with a mixture of apprehension and defiance. When I inquired why, one of them explained, her voice barely above a whisper, "Because Dad is throwing us a party, and I don't want you near him." I asked when their father was released, a question that had been burning in my mind for years. They claimed he was let out at the end of April for good behavior, his sentence commuted due to his exemplary conduct and the remorse he had shown. I cried, a torrent of tears streaming down my face because he was gone, released back into the world without me, and it shattered me even more to realize that my children's newfound happiness, their increased presence in my life, was directly linked to his absence. They were more present because he was gone, their lives brighter, their hearts lighter, knowing he was safe and free. They felt better and more cheery now that their father was back in their lives, a comforting presence in their turbulent world. It wasn't because we were beginning to recover, that our fractured family was slowly healing. It was because they had him back, and I was still on the outside looking in. When I questioned where he was staying, they told me he was living with my brother, seeking refuge with the man who had always been his staunchest ally. I tried calling, desperate to speak with him, to hear his voice, to beg for his forgiveness. But he refused to answer, his phone ringing unanswered. I attempted going over to my brother's house, clinging to the hope of a reconciliation, holding all the letters that had been returned throughout the years, a physical manifestation of my unrequited remorse. And I caught a glimpse of him through the crack in the door, his face etched with a mixture of weariness and resentment. I called his name, my voice trembling with emotion. But my brother told me to leave, his tone firm, unwavering. I handed him the letters, a silent offering of my pain and regret, and departed, my heart heavy with despair. When I reached the driveway, defeated and heartbroken, I heard his voice, a familiar sound that sent shivers down my spine. When I turned around, he was walking toward me, his expression unreadable. I immediately started crying, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions that washed over me, and rushed to hug him, to embrace him, to feel his presence once more. But he didn't reciprocate. He didn't open his arms to me, didn't offer a comforting embrace. Instead, he returned my letters, pushing them back into my hands, his eyes devoid of any warmth or affection. "You forgot this," he said, his voice cold and detached, a stranger's voice. I cried as he walked away, my tears falling onto the unopened letters, blurring the ink. I begged and pleaded for him to talk to me, to give me a chance to explain, to express my remorse. But he simply walked back into the home, disappearing behind the closed door, leaving me standing alone in the driveway, shattered and humiliated. My children stood outside the entrance, their faces expressionless, their eyes staring at me with a chilling lack of love or compassion. At that point, I knew the truth. My children were simply tolerating me, putting on a facade of normalcy for my sake. But their hearts remained closed off, their love extinguished by my actions. However, despite the overwhelming despair, I still want to improve things, to mend the broken pieces of our family. I'd like to tell them how selfish I was, to truly explain the depth of my regret. I want to tell him how much I miss him, how much I regret destroying what we had, how I long for the days when we were a happy, loving family. So I'm still trying to navigate my daily existence, clinging to the hope that one day, things will get better, that one day, I can earn back their love and forgiveness. My mother informed me that my AP's ex-wife began seeing my ex 2 years ago, seeking comfort and companionship, and has been returning to see him regularly since his release. I don't really care. All I want is for him to forgive me, to understand the depth of my remorse, to believe that I truly regret what I've done. I want him to speak to me, to break down the walls he's built around his heart. I want him to be with me, to share his life with me once more. I want him to look at me like he used to, with love and adoration, his eyes filled with a passion that only I could ignite. I want my kids to be with us, to complete our family circle once again. I really want my family back, but I know I do not deserve it. Even if we miraculously reunite, even if we somehow manage to rebuild our shattered lives, it will never be the same. The trust is gone, the innocence lost, the scar is too deep to fully heal. I was selfish, I was reckless, I was foolish. And I wish, more than anything, that I could take it all back. That I could rewind time and make different choices. That I could erase the pain I have caused. My son's response. This is a response to my mother's post entitled "My Selfishness Ruined My Family." I'm a frequent Reddit user. Therefore I'm using a throwaway since I don't want anyone in my social circle to know this is me. I try to keep my past a secret. My college buddies are unaware that my father is in prison, and I don't want to inform them, fearing their judgment. So, as I strolled around campus minding my own business, I overheard others talking about and sharing this post, its lurid details spreading like wildfire. It brought back a lot of emotions I've been working to overcome, reopening old wounds. I looked it up, and found enough circumstantial evidence to conclude it was about my family. About us, which enraged me. I reached out to my mother, and as usual, tears flowed. A predictable response from the woman who always plays the victim. I yelled at her, unleashing years of pent-up frustration and resentment. When I went to visit my father and told him what I did, he yelled at me as well. His voice filled with disappointment. But he is a wonderful man, a man of unwavering principles, and he only yelled at me for cussing, reprimanding me for my foul language. He always tells me that even if I don't love my mother, I should respect her. That she is still my mother, regardless of her actions. But it is difficult to appreciate someone like her. Someone who has caused so much pain and suffering to our family. My father has always battled against the odds, constantly emphasizing the importance of being grateful for growing up in a community where we would not be attacked for obtaining excellent marks or reading books, privileges he never had. He informed us that where he grew up, in the South Bronx, children were bullied for acting white, for striving for success, for attending college. He described how difficult it was for him, navigating the treacherous streets of the South Bronx, constantly facing adversity. My aunts informed us that when he was 13, he joined a gang, a desperate attempt to protect himself, to be left alone at school, to survive in a harsh and unforgiving environment. When he was 15, his father died of cancer, a devastating loss that turned his world upside down. My father had to be a surrogate parent to his two younger sisters, stepping up to provide for them in the absence of his father, due to a lack of life insurance. He worked tirelessly, taking on any job he could find to help pay the rent and put food on the table, sacrificing his own needs for the sake of his family, all while still attending school. Determined to get an education and escape the cycle of poverty, my father felt it was lucky that his mother remarried a wonderful man, and relocated to upstate New York, seeking a better life for her children, a safer environment where they could thrive. My uncle informed me that when they first met my father, they thought he was peculiar, an outsider who didn't quite fit in. It was the 1990s, and when my father strolled into school wearing baggy trousers and a Puerto Rican flag shirt, a proud display of his heritage, they decided to tease him to test his resolve. My uncle said they weren't expecting my father to fight back, to stand up for himself. But he did. He kicked their ass, defending his honor, proving he wouldn't be intimidated. Instead of walking away, gloating in his victory, my father helped him up, offering a gesture of peace, and asked if he wanted to skip school, share a 40, and talk things over. A genuine attempt to connect. My uncle remarked that when my father did that, he knew they'd be buds, that they were destined to be friends. And they soon started hanging out, forging a strong bond of friendship. That's when my father introduced him to my mother, and they hit it off. Their connection instant and undeniable. They attended the same college, falling deeply in love, and got married by the end of their first year, embarking on a journey together. Growing up, my parents were always in a romantic relationship, their love palpable, their connection unwavering. They were always holding hands, stealing kisses, and whispering sweet nothings. A constant display of affection that, as a child, I found quite humiliating, cringing at their public displays of affection. Even at the beginning of my senior year, when everything went wrong, when the world as we knew it imploded, my father treated my mother as if she were a teenager, showering her with attention and affection, never taking her for granted. He loved and appreciated her, valuing her presence in his life. I can honestly tell that he never put her on a pedestal, never idealized her in an unrealistic way. He always said that a man who puts his wife on a pedestal will eventually find himself looking up at her, feeling inferior. When I questioned why, he responded, because she'll always be looking down on you, feeling superior. Treat her as your equal, as your partner, as your best friend. My father informed me that both his father and stepfather shared the same philosophy, a guiding principle for a successful marriage. Treat your wife as an equal, respect her opinions, and value her as your greatest friend and confidant, just as you are. My father had his own unique charm, his own way of expressing his love and affection. He was a large guy with a booming voice and an infectious laugh, always joking, always trying to make us smile. And despite his imposing size, he was incredibly gentle, treating my mother with the utmost care and respect. I used to enjoy it when he sang to my mother, serenading her with silly songs. His voice off-key but filled with love. He'd buy her flowers, not just for special occasions, but simply because it was Thursday and he was thinking about her. A small gesture that spoke volumes. He occasionally wrote her love letters, pouring out his heart in heartfelt words, and defended her fiercely whenever she was treated rudely or disrespected, standing up for her without hesitation. He frequently complimented her on her beauty, telling her she was beautiful inside and out. My father demonstrated to the daughters the type of man they should have in their lives, setting a high standard for their future partners. My father was always there for my uncle, his best friend since childhood. Even when everyone else believed he was a lost cause, a hopeless case, my father never gave up on him, never stopped believing in him. And as my grandfather once stated with a twinkle in his eye, he knocked the stupid out of him and left behind the man he was supposed to be. A humorous anecdote that has always made me laugh. My father showed me how a guy, a friend, and a husband should act, embodying the qualities of loyalty, compassion, and unwavering support. Prior to her affair, my mother had always adored my father, cherishing his presence in her life. He was supportive and encouraging, always pushing her to pursue her dreams. He was her woman pep rally when she was feeling low, and she was his. Their love a constant source of strength and inspiration. They had the marriage that we all wanted, a testament to their love and commitment. Then my mother messed it up, shattering the idyllic facade, revealing the cracks beneath the surface. I recall those months when she spoke to my father as if he were beneath her, treating him with disdain and disrespect, her words sharp and cutting. He pushed back, trying to salvage the situation, but he always controlled himself, never resorting to violence. Even though my father was a college graduate and a successful financial consultant, a man of intelligence and sophistication, he could go from zero to ghetto in 5 seconds. A testament to his street smarts and his willingness to defend himself and his loved ones. Grandma described him as being similar to his father, nice, respectable, and helpful, but willing to cut your neck out with his bare hands if you crossed him. A fierce protector of his family. My father tried everything to salvage the situation, desperately attempting to win back my mother's affection. He bought her flowers, planned romantic dinners, and danced with her in the living room. But she was lost in her own little world, consumed by her affair, and mistreated him cruelly, disregarding his feelings. We all witnessed it, the gradual disintegration of our family, and it had a significant impact on my brother and twins, shattering their sense of security. But my father smiled, putting on a brave face, and assured us that everything would work out. That mom was probably just stressed out at work and bringing it home. A plausible explanation that offered a glimmer of hope. I believed it, clinging to that explanation, especially after she quit her job, severing ties with the source of her supposed stress. I honestly believed it was her employment that was the issue. That once she was free from the pressures of her career, she would return to her old self, the loving and supportive mother we all knew and loved. Then my father was arrested, shattering that illusion and revealing the ugly truth. Mom, do you know how embarrassed we felt when the entire school was discussing what